Our story starts with a boy holding a piece of wood in his hand. King, a drop hunter, finds himself facing a low-class wolf. Even though the creature is quite weak, he struggles against it. In this world our protagonist lives in, he can only defeat monsters that are almost defeated by other hunters. Now, one of those hunters, who is furious, faces our protagonist. At this moment, he wonders what will happen to him from now on. Besides not being able to face this creature one-on-one, in this world, he is known more as a burden to society. These are the hunters who can't fight monsters right away. As soon as he thought about what he should be doing to defeat this wolf, we see the wolf acting firsthand. The little creature charges at our protagonist, but he doesn't let it go unanswered. Armed with a shield and a wooden sword, he charges at the little wolf. However, his shield and sword are broken on the wolf's first charge. Everything he had in hand was shattered, and he falls to the ground. The wolf also falls on top of our protagonist, sinking its teeth into the boy. At this moment, he understands how Trash feels. But even Trash had an advantage over him, and now that he is nothing but a loser, he can only accept his end. Well, that's what he thought at the moment. However, that's not what he wanted next. Our protagonist grabs the broken sword handle and thrusts it into the wolf after charging at it. Maybe we could see that this wolf could have easily defeated him. To understand how he got there, we need to go back a bit. Today, I bring you a story where our protagonist becomes a gravedigger in any town out there. We see a hunter heading towards a portal, but as he walks towards that portal, he notices someone inside it running full speed towards him. Upon closer inspection, it's King. He was the unknown guy running towards this hunter. However, what made him run so fast from that portal was the monster chasing him from behind. At this moment, he also wanted to catch our protagonist. But as soon as he emerged from that portal, we see another hunter there dealing with the creature that also wanted to come out of the portal. As soon as that creature was defeated by that hunter, we see our protagonist taking care of things. He even wondered what would happen to him if he let that thing fall behind, because in this world, it's worth a good amount of money. But even though it's worth a lot, higher-ranked hunters make the weaker hunters collect these things. Thinking about what he would gain from this job he did there, we see only one hunter who was nearby stepping on that box. After stepping on that box, he asks our protagonist if he had secretly taken one of those fragments that were inside that box. He, who has worked in this field for a long time, already knew the rules to avoid future problems. So he just tells what he did during that raid. As soon as our protagonist says this, the hunter leaves him aside. But then our protagonist turns to the portal, and we see two more hunters running out of the portal. Here we see something that possibly happened during that raid. For some reason, the hunters cleared a specific part of the raid, leaving some things behind. Living monsters, this is what the hunters deal with, only picking up the drops left behind. Our protagonist suffers greatly encountering these monsters along the way, but for him, all he's been through is now part of his life. Inside a bus, we can see him holding his reward for today. He only collected a small fraction of the leftover trash. Even though what he holds in his hand is quite little, for him, it's good because this money is no longer his. In the past, he borrowed $1 million from some loan sharks, and now he owes them a bit. After working hard on these drops, our protagonist has already paid half of what he owed. His thoughts are interrupted when one of these guys approaches him. The man offers him an additional job since our protagonist was eager for money. He offers a unique job that pays much more than what he earned from this ride. He wonders how such a high commission could be happening, and he didn't know about it. Since he's desperate for money, he could help them collect some things. Our protagonist, hearing this, simply accepts. Now, inside the bus, they follow the path to where they are going. Inside the bus, we can see people chatting among themselves. One of them mentioned that things have gotten much worse than before. Before, it was like they were playing, but now, the hunters want to put those with no fighting power in front lines and send them to high-level hides without caring about their lives. While they talk about this, we see our protagonist here listening to everything. 10 years ago, a portal connecting the real world to the abyss appeared in our protagonist's world. As soon as that portal appeared, many monsters emerged from it and wreaked havoc on this world. However, after the complete destruction of the world, hunters started appearing out of nowhere. They managed to deal with these monsters, basically cleaning up all the monsters in the world. Now they go to the abyss to take care of the monsters, but inside the abyss there are magical crystals. Not only that, but inside these abysses you could also find magical items like legendary weapons or common weapons, or even potions worth some money. This discovery led to the discovery of a new continent for the second time, which further accelerated the world's development. As the worlds evolved, so did the companies. They didn't want low-level hunters, which made our protagonist suffer a bit. His sister got sick, and he basically needed to pay for her treatment in the hospital, which was becoming more expensive. He says that if he doesn't pay, the doctors might have to disconnect some things. Our protagonist, who means no harm to his family, tries to find several jobs. But even after trying to find various jobs, he doesn't find any. His reputation declines, and due to this, people who trusted him start talking behind his back, which makes our protagonist desperate. At this moment, luck appears. A guy handed him a card that he could possibly become a hunter, but his rank wouldn't be high. However, for our protagonist, it was better than before. Now he sighs because he sees that his debt with Agate was coming to an end. Or what was that about? After sighing there, he ends up standing up because an extra comments to our protagonist that after getting $1 million from Agate, he kind of put all that into an investment, but he was unlucky to lose it all. Now he has to chase some money to pay it all back. Our protagonist already knew the mistake he made and lowers his head. Besides all this, he has a sister with an illness that was hard to cure, but she always needed our protagonist's help. With all these problems on hand, the extras end up asking why he continues to live. Ignoring these guys' stupid questions, she ends up getting to the point where she should have gotten to a while ago. Upon arriving, we can see some hunters calling for them, who were supposed to have started the raid a while ago, but the scavengers somehow took a bit longer. To not be interrogated by these hunters, they simply apologize. After that, they enter the portal, and the rest follow. Our protagonist stands in front of this portal. This time he might have the chance to make a lot of money, but he needs to come back alive, feeling confident that he would return alive. Our protagonist enters the portal. Now our protagonist is entering a slightly different raid because for the first time, he's entering a B-rank raid. As soon as he enters, he's surprised by all the stuff that's there. But the hunters there don't stand still for long. One of them notices monsters coming their way, and yes, after noticing, several wolf monsters appear in front of them. As soon as they appear, the tank asks one of the mages there to handle these types of monsters. So it's done, and in front of them, several ghost monsters to catch them. But the guy starts walking slowly towards these wolves. After a while, he stops, and the wolves were about to devour the little creature. But at that moment, he snaps his fingers, and a fireball appears, heading towards the wolves. Then an explosion occurs. After this explosion, those wolves that were there were thrown up. Some ran to avoid being caught again, but our shield asks everyone to stay prepared. The wolves aren't running. They are basically repositioning themselves to ambush them again, so they needed to stay alert. While I was thinking about this, the other one asks this brute where they would be going. So the brute shouts to the hunters to follow him because they would now be going up to the 5th floor. But he comments that the 5th floor is the most dangerous. There, for some reason, some monsters started to mutate. The hunters sent last time unfortunately didn't return, so they were curious about what was happening up there. Thus, they had the objective to climb to the 5th floor. They wonder if someone is aiming to go there, so they start walking. But one of the hunters stops to tie his shoelaces. While one ties, another one asks the garbage collectors not to get separated from him because if they do, they won't go back to help these garbage collectors. While saying this, we can see that hunter tying his shoelace. Behind that guy, our protagonist walks, looking sideways, and he doesn't notice the presence of this hunter who is there on the ground tying his shoelace. Just then, he kicks the guy's shoulder. The guy falls, and once on the ground, he kind of wonders if he's blind. He grabs our protagonist by the collar and lifts him up. However, one of the guys asks him to leave this garbage collector alone because it's not worth messing with this guy. Their first mission was simple. Don't mess with this stranger. They need to find the 5th floor soon. So it was done. He throws our protagonist aside and tells this garbage collector to find his way again. If this happens again, he won't forgive our protagonist. Now that he's on the ground, our protagonist thinks that garbage collectors are basically known in the hunter's circle as useless guys. Also a disgrace to humanity. He also receives a bonus. He is humiliated within these arts by the hunters. The value of a garbage collector like our protagonist in this world is nothing. They belittle him. But that's what they thought because our protagonist's experience value was reaching 99 out of 100. What this means is that our boy will have a moment of awakening. What he really needs is to find a monster and defeat it in a one-on-one. By possibly defeating that monster, he will earn a single XP. And that single XP will level him up. Our protagonist will try to awaken as a level 1 hunter. He just needs to find a single opportunity, and it has appeared early on for our boy. In front of him, a ghost wolf appeared. We can already see the sparkle in our boy's eyes as he looked and saw an opportunity in front of him. He looks to the side and sees a shield and a wooden sword. He thinks of grabbing them, but the wolf that suddenly appears almost catches him. We see him easily dodging this bite. Now that he has dodged, we see him standing there. This was the unique opportunity of his life, and he has waited for this his whole life. Our hero will have to fight with all he has. As he said this, our protagonist starts walking towards that wolf. However, the wolf was also prepared for everything, but our hero was much more than just that creature, and our hero goes all out against it. He leaps towards it, then quickly jumps back with a piece of wood in hand, hitting its head. However, nothing happens. But that wasn't enough. He tries to strike its head again, hoping this time the monster's head would break. Instead, it's his sword that breaks, and the monster's head is unharmed. As he steps back, we can see his companions in the background urging him to leave, as this creature could easily overpower our brave boy. This might cost him his life. He hears this, but even hearing it from his friends, he stands firm. Not for long, though, as he soon has to run from the wolf. For some reason, the wolf leaves no opening for him to attack, despite being weaker. Sung, our deep web boy, realizes he's the one struggling the most, but he wouldn't give up easily. At this moment, our hero runs to a certain point and then jumps back, landing behind the wolf. He strikes its head with the piece of wood with all his might. As he damages the wolf, the scene cuts to another place. Here, we see the companions of our protagonist advancing, finishing off the remaining monsters. They are now waiting for the scavengers who for some reason lag behind, only hindering their progress. The hunters have not only finished off the monsters, but also picked up the best items dropped during this raid. Strong hunters like them have the option to get the most valuable items, while those who lack strength are left behind. But even though they don't get the best items, these strong hunters leave behind the worthless ones for the scavengers. As one of them mocks the scavengers, another points in a different direction, saying that more monsters are approaching, and they need to deal with them. Returning to our main focus, we can see a scene where the wolf bites our boy's shoulder. He's thrown back, showing his despair, fearing he might die or be considered worthless. He doesn't want that. He then grabs the remaining piece of his wooden sword, raises it high, and stabs it into the wolf's head. The creature roars in pain as it dies. Our protagonist nearly collapses, but realizes he delivered a critical blow to the wolf. It falls dead, and he stands victorious. He lets out a loud cheer, which catches the attention of the hunters. Approaching him, one of them can't believe he managed to defeat a low-level wolf alone. But if our hero wants to play the part, he'll have to endure a bit of suffering. A guy like him, considered worthless, won't receive any rewards for defeating such a weak monster. But for him, defeating the ghost wolf, which he considered superior, is a significant victory. He lets out a triumphant shout, but it might cost him his life. Our guy was always looking for this because there he ends up explaining some things when the accumulated experience point reaches level 1. Even being the person of the lowest level, you could have that small chance. Your small chance could make our protagonist change jobs. He could be awakening as a squire, a healer, or even a mage with high rank. But to achieve these goals, it was basically necessary to find a way to get points in the middle of raids. And whenever our protagonist saw his opportunity, our guy would always send his Rasta towards the monsters that were always left behind, the ones the hunters didn't want. But our guy embraced it, and so he spent the years. And in these years, he risked his life a lot to find some openings to even get a single point to level up his system. After years and years, it started accumulating. From 10, it jumped to 30. From 30, it jumped to 90, but it reached 99. And there he had to suffer to defeat this ghost wolf. After suffering, our protagonist achieved what he so desired, the 100%. And at that moment, this was the only way for our protagonist to awaken a second class. And it was also an easier way to gain experience. The conditions for the class awakening were met by our protagonist. The system understood that our guy could have that second awakening. The system updates. The guy who was in front of him couldn't believe that this kid really got some experience to possibly change jobs. The system appears in front of our protagonist, congratulates the kid for achieving level 1, and there he got what he wanted. He managed to awaken a second job. He's level 1. His companion there is surprised at the moment by the awakening of our prota, but then he can't hold back his laughter. He starts laughing. Our protagonist did manage to change jobs. Before, his job was rubbish, but now he got an even worse job than before. He saw that our hero awakened as a gravedigger. Then he approaches our protagonist and says that he had the opportunity to change classes, but he was unlucky to get a class that wasn't as dignified in his view. The kid mocks him, but he got tired of mocking our protagonist. And here he starts to say that the other trash pickers who were there end up pulling up, and now only our protagonist is left, and he will have to perform this mission of collecting everything there for them. While saying this to our protagonist, he ends up going ahead. Now that he's left behind, our protagonist wonders if this class he awakened to was really that weak, but he also wonders if the Gravedigger class was strong or weak like that. Then he turns to that kind of monster that was knocked down by those hunters. When he looks at that type of wolf, the system shines. Our guy sees something strange happening in front of him. A system screen appears saying that the ghost wolf could basically be sucked by our protagonist, and there he could recycle everything that the wolf has. All he had to do was press recycle. Our protagonist then presses it, and as soon as he does, behind our hero, several MS appear. Those hands that appeared behind our protagonist start walking little by little towards the creature that was just dust on the ground after. Walk a little bit. Those things there end up grabbing onto the body of that monster. And at that moment, our protagonist understands a bit that this ability of his could be working like that. So after that corpse of that wolf is dragged all the way inside, in front of our protagonist appears something written, recycle garbage. All he had to do was accept the proposal, so he accepted it. Our hero's system starts to clear everything up after everything is done there in front of our protagonist. A hand emerges. That hand ends up handing our protagonist an attribute card. Those things were basically removed from the wolf, and now our protagonist has the chance to gain the wolf's abilities. As soon as he realizes this, he asks the system to open the system's priority panel, which then shows our protagonist's statistics. Now, looking at that was simple. He looks again at that card in the hand of that thing there. He realizes he needs 3 points in agility, and at that moment, he has 3 points. He ends up putting all 3 points into agility. As soon as he put those 3 points into agility, our protagonist then has the option to use that ability and the wolf's card in front of him. As soon as he realizes this from the system, our protagonist asks the system to put it inside our big boy, and our web-deep sug here starts to feel the rock entering him. And a round web, a green light circles the kid. But then, after closing his eyes and opening them, he realizes it's all over, but he feels a bit strange. However, he didn't have enough time to notice his new powers because someone calls for our protagonist. He needed to appear in front of them as quickly as possible, so it's done. He tried to run in a normal way, but it didn't work here, from the deep web, so he ended up putting one foot in front and with the other, he started running, but now it was different. With just one leap, he managed to run like he had never run before in his life. While running there, he stumbled upon a Vinhero and then fell face first onto the ground. Now that he was on the ground, he realized that maybe this was a skill he had gained from the system. However, to use the same skill he used here again, he would have to wait a bit. After waiting a while, it seemed to recharge, and he could use that DH again to run at that speed. Now understanding how it works, he gets up, but now he takes a closer look at it. And even looking at it, he doesn't understand how these abilities could work differently. However, he was eager to acquire other skills. So he looks to the side and notices several corpses of those same ghost wolves that our protagonist had recently sucked in. Those hunters left all of that for our protagonist, right? But at this moment, facing that pile of bodies, our protagonist realizes that he might not only be able to acquire the skills of those monsters, but also gain some kind of experience. All this that was appearing in front of him was thanks to the skill he had just awakened called Gravedigger. Realizing he could absorb that pile of monsters into himself, he activates the Gravedigger skill. After activating this skill, several of those appear behind our protagonist, devouring the wolves left and right. Then our protagonist is putting the new hacks to the test. After using that devouring system, our protagonist starts receiving infinite points from the system. He managed to earn points that in his life he took several years to accumulate, but this wasn't all that positive, it seems. The monsters our protagonist managed to devour did something different. Now our protagonist gained new abilities from the system, but he noticed something here. After devouring that many monster corpses, our protagonist realized that if he devoured too many monsters at once, the level of experience and perhaps the chance to acquire a skill from the monster itself would be greatly reduced. So it means that if our boy doesn't want a stolen skill, he will have to devour one by one, or he could simply devour 9 monsters. By devouring 9 monsters, our protagonist would get 9 rewards. Some good, some bad. But now our protagonist receives some points from the system. He has only 111 points. Our protagonist sees that points won't be a problem for him in the future, and he could distribute them as he pleases. But he wonders where he should allocate the points first. However, our protagonist doesn't think about where to allocate them. He just starts distributing them across these attributes. He increases a bit of health, then a bit of luck as he needed it. Our boy goes crazy, rolling his attributes non-stop while he levels up his attributes elsewhere. We can see that group of hunters who were finishing up, dragging up some wolves that survived. As soon as they finish dragging up the last one, we see the brute changing the subject, commenting that the unlucky one, that garbage collector, managed to awaken his class here. However, the class our protagonist awakened was a class he had never even seen on the list. Changing jobs might be rare, but the other said it could possibly be. Yet in the end, it would just be a pretty useless classification for someone like our protagonist. He was average, but even though he awakened with a hidden class, our protagonist wouldn't be that strong. He's just a level 1 guy. So in the end, our protagonist would possibly have the strength of an average person, or a bit more, which wouldn't change anything for him. So since it wouldn't change anything, he asked to ignore this class and move on because he needed to reach the last floor. So they kept walking, and there they encountered a kind of tunnel. After walking a bit, they saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Walking towards it, they emerged into that light, where they came face to face with these strange roots. Among these roots were some creatures or things stuck to them. The people there wondered what happened, but after thinking a bit, they understood that these could possibly be those hunters who entered here and never came out. One of them was on top of one of these hunters, who was trapped inside this tree. He realized that by staying here for too long, this guy turned into dried salt right there. And possibly the same thing happened to him because maybe there was a guy or a mage or monster enemy with a high magic rating. But our tough guy turns to another and asks if this place was some kind of B rank. Then they would be hunters of a much higher rank than a B rank hunter, so they shouldn't have difficulties fighting these monsters. If it wasn't the monsters that defeated them, then what was it? Just then one looked to the side and saw several monsters emerging from underground. One of them grabbed our tough guy's leg, while those hunters were trying to deal with those undead creatures outside. On an open TV, someone commented that the hunters had been inside that portal for hours and none had come out. But while talking about the hunters, we can see our tough guy asking everyone to gather in a corner because things got worse for them. He realized they had fallen into some kind of trap. Escaping now would be nearly impossible, but the one who likes to tease our protagonist didn't want to stand still. He used a fireball, and the tough guy also used his shield to defeat these monsters, but that wasn't enough because the monsters revived or something. Someone was controlling them, and this was real because right after, in front of the tough guy, appeared the boss of this floor. This was a high-level boss. At this moment, the hunters didn't even think twice about staying there because if they stayed, they would undoubtedly be attacked. But just as they thought this, several hunters who had transformed into those monsters flew towards the other hunters. To avoid being caught, with all his might, he fought against these creatures. While this was happening in another place, we can see our protagonist finishing his last collection. However, while finishing his last collection, he hears a scream from the background. At this moment, he gets scared and wonders what that scream was, but he ignores it as the system appears in front of him. Now, our protagonist achieved an achievement for the first time. As soon as he achieved this, the kid becomes very happy because he could possibly receive his first reward. After waiting for a while for his reward to load, in front of him appears something. It was a dagger that was so far useless and weak, disappointing our protagonist. He thought a high-ranking weapon would come, but since it didn't, he had to accept it. However, thinking about what he could do to get better items, our hero hears the scream again. But this time, it's much louder than before, catching his attention. He turns towards the screams and is startled to see someone running towards him, screaming. It was one of those monsters attacking the hero's group. When he sees this, our protagonist is so startled that not even the Wi-Fi could pass through him. But the monster didn't want to just watch. Thinking about a plan, he tries to grab our protagonist, but he jumps back, dodging the first attack. Once he dodged the monster's strike, he wanted to counterattack, but he's surprised that he managed to dodge that move. He thought he might have been done for, but looking closer at himself, he realizes he's much faster. Maybe it's because of the points he allocated in his system. Feeling stronger now, he possibly could defeat this beast in front of him, but just as he thinks that, the monster also thinks of doing the same to our protagonist. As the monster strikes, our protagonist dodges to the side, making the punch hit the wall. After dodging, our protagonist notices in the background that not only did he add points to his agility, but he also added points to his strength. At this moment, our protagonist uses the soul spirit, which allows him to dash forward. As soon as he uses it, he wants to test his punch on the monster, since it's his turn to hit. He flies towards the monster, landing a punch on its face, throwing it against the wall. As he throws it against the wall, our protagonist notices something more. He used an effect that, when punching an opponent, allows him to break 100% of its defense. So, our protagonist has a 100% advantage to win this fight. This time, our protagonist is not the same person anymore, so now he possibly can deal with any monsters. But then, our protagonist sees something else from the system. He can allocate points to intelligence. By allocating intelligence points, our protagonist can see things about these monsters that he couldn't see before. So he does that, and realizes that this monster was an elite human. Searching for its weakness, he finds out that its weak point is its neck. But when he finds this monster's weak point, the monster starts advancing towards our protagonist, and our protagonist doesn't back down. Time advances with all its speed towards the monster. He ends up launching a blow towards our prota. But to avoid getting hit, our big guy simply dodges by lowering himself, giving her a slight sweep. However, here our protagonist. He was 100% in advantage. Now he was behind her because his goal all along was to find a weakness to attack her neck. So he ends up using that small card from the system that our protagonist just received from the sword card. So when he asked the system delivers it to our protagonist. Then our protagonist sort of uses his sword to hit the critical point of that monster. With just one hit from the sword, the monster stands there bewildered, wondering what it was doing. But then our protagonist realizes he hit the monster's weak spot squarely. The monster falls to the ground, and our protagonist kills a human parasite. As soon as it falls to the ground, our protagonist starts receiving new things from the system. But what he most wants to know is if this type of human parasite can be recycled. The system confirms this for our protagonist. As soon as it confirms, he asks the system to recycle it. Once recycled, our protagonist gains a passive poison resistance ability. What this means is that our protagonist can withstand any type of poison, and by using that card, he could basically create an antidote to counteract the poison he had taken before. So our protagonist asks the system to create a type of poison for him to test. The system does so, creating a potion for our protagonist. Looking at this card, he understands that if he drinks it, the potion will be recreated as a healing potion. So, out of curiosity, he starts sipping a little, thinking about what might happen. The system ends up recovering some of the life our protagonist lost while fighting the monsters before. But this potion not only didn't fully recover our protagonist, but also left him feeling perhaps stronger. He sets this aside for now. At this moment, our protagonist starts picking up the remaining points he had to put into intelligence. The more he puts in, the smarter he becomes. With this, our protagonist will be able to discover his opponent's weaknesses more easily. So, he distributes 5 points into intelligence, leaving our hero brimming with intelligence. While he was distributing his points in the system, he hears noises. The noises were from those monsters from before. As soon as he hears this, our protagonist sort of turns around. When he turns, our protagonist realizes that those monsters have appeared again, but now they appear a bit bigger than before, and in greater numbers. So our protagonist thinks he can now use the new abilities he acquired. Moreover, people in the world always called him trash, but now he could change that title he holds. He now wants to show the world his true strength. While thinking about what he would do to show his true strength, we see the monsters running towards him, but our protagonist was prepared, holding a machete in his hand. Now he was much calmer, He had awakened as a gravedigger, and as a gravedigger, our protagonist wouldn't let these fly monsters get in his way. He now challenges these monsters to come at him with everything they've got because he's ready to handle them all. As soon as he said this, the monsters begin to advance. In another place, we can also see the monsters advancing on those hunters. The monsters were managing to gain a slight advantage over some of the hunters. One of them even thought that if they let their guard down for a moment, it would be over for them. After all, these monsters' strength was much greater than when the person was alive. Our tough guy realizes that this boss isn't playing around, so he tells his team to retreat because they wouldn't stand a chance. They start running, but in their haste, they leave themselves open. One of the monsters attacks a member of his team, dragging him away, and another teammate gets caught by one of the monsters, becoming somewhat controlled by it. They couldn't afford to fall behind. They needed to run. While running, one of them thinks that it's impossible to escape with both of them alive. Someone needed to stay behind to distract them, so our tough guy stays back, taking care of the monsters. He just asks them to call for help as quickly as possible. While running, we see him thinking that he came here just for the money and the equipment he has. They're worth a lot. If he dies, he won't gain anything, so he needs to use everything he has to escape this raid. He then uses one of his spells, which paralyzes our tough guy. As he turns to his teammate, asking what he's doing, the guy just points towards him, saying he left someone behind to distract the monsters. Meanwhile, the monsters jump on our tough guy. We see the coward running, and as he runs, his teammate screams for help, but also smiles. We see him commenting that he has now managed to escape too, taking all his money with him. But as he runs, he doesn't look ahead and bumps into someone. This person gives a cold look to our companion, but our companion freezes, not wanting to engage. On closer inspection, he realizes this person in front of him is our protagonist. Our protagonist asks him what he was really trying to do there, using his own teammates to escape. He doesn't answer our protagonist's question. Instead, he looks back and wonders what happened to the rest of the monsters and why they are in this state. But he doesn't care anymore about what's happening. He turns to our protagonist and realizes our protagonist saw everything that happened there. If our protagonist manages to survive this, he could report him and lose everything. So, he decides to eliminate our protagonist as well. But taking the time to do it would be inefficient. He turns to our protagonist and tells him to stay back since he wanted to be a hero before. This was a good opportunity. So he kicks our protagonist in the stomach. However, by kicking him, the system gives our protagonist greater resistance. The impact of the kick is redirected towards the one who kicked him, who falls to the ground, wondering how someone like him could be so powerful. Our MC looks at him now. He understands everything that happened and now knows who the real trash is, so he's here now using his system to manage to recycle this trash. Then, those mothers grab onto this extra and he's dragged into the system. However, the system starts recycling the thing, but while recycling it, the system ends up sort of throwing it out because the trash he put in there was too rotten, and he didn't want to recycle it. So the system sort of tells our protagonist that he won't be able to gain that guy's ability below him, but there was a small chance that our protagonist could acquire that extra's ability for 3 minutes, or even more. He just needed to upgrade some things in his system. So as soon as he upgraded a few things, our protagonist manages to learn a new ability. This was the ability to control fire. As soon as he learned this ability, our protagonist starts seeing several monsters appearing in front of him. The creatures were bloodthirsty and run towards our protagonist since he gained a new ability, so he decides to test it out. As those monsters come at him, our protagonist points his hand and uses just a small fraction of his power. With this small fraction, our protagonist manages to send all these monsters flying upwards, so he's left stunned. He didn't think that recycling that ability would significantly boost his power. But while he's stunned by this new ability he acquired, we can see something appearing behind him. That creature jumps towards our protagonist and almost catches him, but he notices just in time and dodges. The creature hits the ground, but isn't satisfied just with that. It runs again towards our protagonist, but he easily dodges its attack again. Now, in front of him, our protagonist summons his sword from the system and swings it towards the creature. However, it's fast and easily manages to block our protagonist's move, but while thinking about this, he looks behind and sees a hulking brute. He thinks that if he could recycle the ability of this brute, he would get a shield, so he uses his system to recycle the brute. The system grabs the brute and takes him to its own space-time, managing to recycle it. In front of him appears the brute's shield. As soon as he takes it, the golden shield, he feels hopeful to put it into practice. He just needed to test it on something around. Then, he sees this creature running towards him, eager to defeat our protagonist. Seeing it coming towards him, our guy swings this shield of his. It was good. It helped our main character get rid of this thing quickly, but as soon as he defeated it, the creature falls to the ground, and right away, our protagonist appears doing something he should have done a long time ago. So he uses his system on this creature. Using his system, he drains its abilities. Now our protagonist possesses its ability, allowing him to have a significant advantage on the battlefield. Holding a dagger in his hand, our protagonist has transformed into the master of daggers. But as soon as he notices this, he becomes more prepared because right in front of him, several of those monsters that appeared earlier show up again. trying to finish off our guy. They run towards him, but our protagonist doesn't stand still. He goes all out against these monsters, sending each of them flying while he fights. All that dragging upwards, someone from another place began to say some things about how they needed to have a first-hand mission to recover the bodies of their companions who were there, and if they happened not to recover them, they would be failing in their missions. Everything they had there inside and had managed to grab was no longer theirs. So then our protagonist takes care of the last monsters that were alive. After dealing with those living monsters, our protagonist ends up sort of recycling that creature. However, all of this was seen by him, but we'll tell you more about that later because now our big guy needed to deal with an even bigger creature. The one that appeared in front of our protagonist was the boss of that floor. Now he was facing our big guy, and our big guy was facing him. So to end this fight as quickly as possible, our protagonist ends up using sugar on him. Using sugar on this monster, our protagonist manages to easily send this boss off. As soon as he defeated this boss, the scene cuts to this place here. In an apartment, we see that extra who survived there, but he kept repeating everything he saw from our protagonist's sugar. However, the guys next to him only wanted to know what happened to him inside that hard, but what he heard from this extra was the same thing. He stole his abilities, and the only thing he asked those guys was that they could catch our protagonist and teach him a lesson. However, given his current state, they wouldn't do anything, but he continues to ask to look for that garbage collector. But already ignoring him, the scene cuts here. Inside a ride, we can already see some hunters. But while those hunters were gathered there, our protagonist was in the background talking to himself. He thought that the black market was a place where you could sell these crystals that you find in those RS, where you get a high percentage. But if you sell to a government institution, they end up taking almost 70% of all the profit you make. At this moment, our protagonist needed to make as much money as possible. And moreover, he needed to avoid drawing too much attention from the main big shots. At this moment, he just wants to make some money without even attracting anyone's attention. Our protagonist wants to take this little by little. That was his goal. But as soon as he said that, in front of him appears a leader of this group of our protagonist, who now tells them to be more careful since this was a raid that none of them had even entered before. So they should basically form a group. But those hunters who just got a new job could be getting close to the leader, as he is handing over a reward or a mission to this newcomer. But as soon as he says this, in the background, we can see our protagonist asking a question, wondering if they were basically satisfied that among them was a very weak guy. He was just a level 1 gravedigger. As soon as he said this, Geraldo there opens his eyes. Some even start laughing. He wondered how a level 1 guy like this was inside that. How did he manage to awaken such a trash class? He basically didn't need to be in the front line. He now just needed to stay in the back with the rest of the garbage collectors, and he could maybe evolve a lot here. For some, this was advantageous. For our protagonist, it was even greater. Our protagonist had a plan all along not to draw anyone's attention, and at this moment, he succeeded. And at this moment, he just didn't need to draw more attention than this point here from Geraldo there himself, so he needs to leave. But as soon as he thought of this, someone from behind appears there. That guy was clinging to our PR's hand and didn't want to let go. Seeing this, he ends up asking him to let go once and for all. So he lets go, but then he starts commenting that they didn't need anyone else in this raid. They already got the ideal people. But he ends up saying they didn't really need anyone. But however, there was one person missing from the group, and our protagonist, even being weak, would be welcome in their group. So our protagonist sees that he could still move forward with them. So he ends up kind of sinking back. Our white-haired girl looked at our protagonist, but then she revealed her name. At that moment, our protagonist remembered that he had heard this name only once before in his life. So memories of his past began to awaken. Our protagonist saw her in a very risky situation. She could have been dragged away, but from there he grabbed an old knife of his and tried his luck. He sent a monster dragging her away, and by doing so, he gained some XP. However, the monster fell flat on the ground, and our protagonist stood there, frozen. The girl behind him wondered if he was okay, but our white-haired girl was surprised to see our protagonist getting up. He was happy and shouted that it was a success. His experience had increased, so killing wolves was worth more than picking up trash. After leveling up a bit, our protagonist turned to our white-haired girl and asked if she was okay.